Namanatuman, Napioman, Ingin Kisakwa, Nashpi, Nachikwa na Itahanoanash, Katapatamish, Katantawa, Wuchiwami, Nawamani Tonk, the Tonksawag.
The Big Bang was a drum roll that called the void to life. Red clay beat with lizards, brown mud spit flies, tall green grasses hid snakes, and birds flapped their wings and made the winds that brought the rain to rivers, ponds, and oceans.
From the ocean came the first person with the tail of a tadpole and the sex of both man and woman and with all the colors of the rainbow. The sun warmed its body and she smiled. And its children of many colors were born.
The children, now either boys or girls, and one color from the rainbow, played hide-and-go-seek until they were so enthralled by where they hid that they forgot they were either hiding or seeking. That is until late at night, when the big green leaves, casting shadows from the light of the moon, would remind them that they were hiding, or by the fires made from shooting stars, they would remember that they were seeking.
Scraped as unevenly by the receding glaciers as an old razor on the face of a man. The red men hunted deer and wolf with bows, arrows, and spears in forests of mixed chestnut, oak, hickory, maple, birch, and pine. In water by the bay they caught tautog and striped bass with bone hooks and nets and set traps for beaver and muskrat. They farmed corn and gathered clams and oysters in the shallows and cooked them over hot stones. In the head of the bay, where Providence sits, the powwow, or shaman, blessed Katanuit for the bounty of corn and beans, and the tribe danced, and children watched for those liberated souls, those glows in the night against the dark autumnal night skies. Chepi, a spirit, talked through the shaman. Your spirits will always be on this land, but you will be joined by others who come with the wind.
I'm a storyteller as well from a tribe, the tribe of Israel. We are a nomadic tribe who has walked desert sands, ate dates and sesame, and whose faces were burned black by the sun. We went out like beams of the sun throughout the world. Excluded from property ownership, we turned to trade and continued the pursuit of the word. We carried the knowledge of the Alexandria Library to Spain, Holland, Germany, Turkey, Italy, and Russian, speaking eventually in languages of cultural fusion. Yiddish combining Hebrew with German and Russian, and Ladino combining Hebrew with Spanish, French, Italian, and Turkish. In the early 20th century, pushed by winds of hatred, we came to Providence, sold rags from carts, saved money, and with the help of others who had lived here longer, built 2 triple-deckers in South Providence on the Narragansett's Pequot Trail, where shamans received visions, and Narragansetts traveled for trade and war with the Pequot tribe.
I am a storyteller as well, born from the fusion of Africans, some enslaved, some free, Scottish coal miners, native tribes from Virginia, and Germans ashamed of their heritage. My parents, Americans, married in 1963 before Dr. Martin Luther King's March on Washington. Did you go, I asked. Honey, my mother said, we were marching every single day just trying to be family. I, who moved to Providence to attend college, stayed and moved off the hill to the third floor of a triple-decker on the south side.
Jacob Howe's triple-decker had 3 porches, 3 families, a common stairway in the back, a common basement, and a yard where America was and still is being created. This is a story about that house, whose white pine walls were made from woods of the northern New England forests, which heard before only the sounds of winged creatures and foraging animals. This is a story about the families who inhabited those walls,
About the baggage they brought,
the lives they led.
and the worlds they created.
This is a story that shows how history sits like a moussaka, a Greek food made of layers.
It's a story about how smells,
Tastes,
sounds, melt from one level to another until each layer is forever changed
this is a story about a past that is always with us.
in an eternally evolving present. It didn't take long for the house to be filled in 1921, after the war to end all wars. The first family to move in were the Chevians, newly arrived from Armenia. They had lived in the shadows of Mount Ararat, where Noah's boat was perched and time stood still until the waters receded and time began anew. Cleansed of evil, the Armenian nation called Aratu formed from 9 local tribes, but soon was torn by conquerors for its rich valleys and strategic positions along trade routes. Fire worshippers turned Christian, victims of Turkish genocide, they, the Chevians, grandmother, mother, father, son, daughter, perched on the 3rd floor of the triple-decker along the Pequot Trail. There, Mount Ararat.
It is Sod Farm in County Mayo. On the western shore of Ireland, a vision came to a woman asleep. It was a vision of a spring bubbling into a pond fed by waterfalls. The river flowed into a city with smokestacks and streets paved with gold. As she, Mrs. O'Rourke, went to the general store, there was a notice up from the Cunard lines with a picture of the spring saying, "To Providence, Rhode Island, money wired immediately." She came home and began packing and told her husband, daughter, and son that they were being delivered to Providence. "Why not Dublin if you want to move so badly?" asked Mr. O'Rourke.
Because, she said, Providence is closer.
They moved into the 2nd floor.
Cold and wet across the face and hands of John Santos. He was fishing for cod off the Cape Verdean island of Brava, as his family had done for generations. He was tired of the cold, wet winds and of feeling his cracked hands, and he wanted something different for his children. His eyes looked west, to where his cousins had gone, whaling with the Americans, cranberry picking on the Cape. He had received packages of clothes and toys from Providence, and now he would take his family where those packages came from. The Santos family lived on the 1st floor.
Stop! On the first Saturday in June, all three families, the Chevians, Santoses, and the O'Rourkes, moved in.
Trunks smelling of transatlantic journeys, rugs brought from home, mirrors, heirloom vases. The families climbed up and down the crowded stairs. The sounds of three languages in the hall, Armenian, Criollo, and Irish, echoed against the white pine walls. Children looked with curiosity at the people with the other dress, and their parents slapped their heads and forced their eyes down, telling them it was impolite to stare.
But the grown-ups, they looked up and they noticed the beauty of the Irish lace, the Armenian rugs, the Cape Verdean paños, or textiles.
However, when they got into their apartments after moving, the O'Rourkes talked about the dark skin of the Santos family.
The Chevians warned their children against the diseases of the others.
And Mrs. Santos warned that if her children were bad, she would send them for a ride on an Armenian carpet and they would never come back to this land of plenty.
The lights of the triple-decker went on and off at all times of the day and night.
The textile mills and jewelry plants where members of each family worked had 3 shifts.
Fabric and jewelry was made by those who had just arrived for those who walked the Fifth Avenues of America's cities.
On cold November days, it was hard to get up and walk in the dark to the factories. Although the Chevians, O'Rourkes, and Santoses walked through the streets of South Providence, their minds were on blossoms in the Anatolian plain in Armenia, or the waters crashing on the summer-heated western Irish shore, and on the hill villages during festival time on the island of Brava.
On a rainy, dark morning, 3 men of those 3 families nodded to each other on their way back to work. In the back of the house, the elder Mrs. Chevian and the elder Mrs. Santos sat while their grandchildren played with metal cars and toy American soldiers.
Young Aram took the truck unexpectedly from Maria.
Aram hit Maria.
Maria hit back.
The two was soon rolling in the dirt until both grandmothers separated them.
Mrs. Chevian took Aram upstairs, returning with some freshly made baklava.
Maria took a piece from the plate held by the outstretched arms of Aram.
Her grandmother took a piece as well. The honey was sweet, made as it was from the journey of bees going flower to flower.
The first contact was indeed both bitter and sweet.
On the 3rd floor, after a meal of dolma and lavash bread, Uncle Edmund, whom they called the Moses of Providence, after the storyteller Moses of Corinth, told ancient Armenian epics, told stories from Armenia. He told about the ancient god, Atzvat, who created heaven and earth, and Avanya, god of war. And he told his niece Anahit that she was named after the most beautiful goddess who was the protector of nations.
On the 2nd floor, Mrs. O'Rourke told her children that more than money, they were inheritors of a great culture of future readers, of a culture that worshiped the cycles of the moon and the world of trees and forests. We are Druids deep down, beneath Christianity and mixed with Christianity. And even as you walk these asphalt streets, remember your mother is still the earth.
And on the 1st floor, Mr. Santos told stories about the sea and its creatures, about his and and their ancestors who arrived by sea from Africa, where they'd been chiefs and warriors and leaders, and how they were captured and brought to the Portuguese-conquered island of Brava on their way to Brazil. Some stayed and mixed with the Portuguese, and in their blood now flowed the magic of Europe and the Moors and the deities of Africa, all stirred by the sea. As hard as America is, he told them, remember how special you are.
It was one of those nights with a full moon. The house felt as if it was floating above its foundations. Musical instruments were brought from their cases, taken from behind chairs and taking off walls. Music, melancholic, celebratory, and reverential, filled the 3 floors.
In the basement, where clothes were washed and sorted, Patrick O'Rourke's shirt was mixed among the Chevians' laundry. Mrs. Chevian came down to the 2nd floor and returned the shirt.
Mrs. Chevian and Patrick smiled shyly as they exchanged laundry.
That night, music flowed as easily as the flows. In the morning, Patrick and Bridget O'Rourke, Maria and Pedro Santos, and Aram and Anahit Chevian, with lunches in hand, headed towards school 3 blocks away. The children stayed close to their siblings, careful not to talk or walk with the others. When in school, their classes were filled with many who knew English better than they. Sometimes they got in trouble because their minds drifted when they couldn't understand their teacher. They learned about other countries where palm trees swayed in the winds, and these countries like Indochina and islands in the Caribbean seemed like nice places to be in the middle of February when their hands and faces were cold. At lunch, they ate food made fun of by the others at their table. At recess, they looked for their siblings, but when they couldn't find them, they gravitated towards their triple-decker neighbors with whom they played tag.
The coughing was loud in the Santos' apartment. No grown-ups were home, and Maria began to spit blood. Pedro knocked on the door upstairs, and in broken English he explained what was happening to the elder Mrs. Chevian, who came downstairs quickly and put her hand over Maria's lungs while she sponged off her head.
Don't you worry, young lady. I have been to the mountains for the night of the Ascension, where the waters rested for one moment during the night, and the flowers, mountains, earth, and trees moved and embraced each other, telling what cures lived amongst them. I listened, I learned, and you will be all right. And she was.
That night, the Santoses brought up cachupa and grog to the O'Rourkes and Chevians in appreciation. The grog was powerful, and it wasn't long